Yo, what is up everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy channel, and in this video I'm going to be giving you guys a couple running back starts and sits that you can use for your week 14 matchups. Most likely if you're watching this video and you're playing in week 14 of the 2020 fantasy football season, you are most likely in the fantasy playoffs or you're a week out from the playoffs. So this is a pretty big week for everyone. So I'm just going to try to give you some advice that I'm going to be using heading into my playoff matchups. And the first running back start that I'm going to go over in this video is Chicago Bears running back David Montgomery. Honestly, guys, I kind of view him as an RB1 this week, which is something I never thought I would say at the start of the season. I always thought he would be like a solid running back 2 kind of guy, but he has been hot lately. Week 12 against the Green Bay Packers, he had 11 carries for 103 yards, and he also had 5 receptions for 40 yards and a touchdown. Week 13 against the Detroit Lions, he had 17 rushes for 72 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns to go along with 4 receptions on 4 targets for 39 yards. So not only is he running the ball well, but he has also been involved in the passing game, and he has a great, fantastic, amazing matchup with the Houston Texans this week. The Texans have given up the second most fantasy points to running backs in 2020. They have also given up the most rushing attempts and the most rushing yards, the second most rushing touchdowns, and the 6th most receiving yards to running backs. So again, this is a great matchup for Montgomery, and he's been hot lately, so I would definitely stick with him in your lineup for week 14. My next running back start of the week is a guy who's going to get a bump because of an injured teammate, and that is running back J.D. McKissic for the Washington football team. He's been a great PPR play all season, and like I said, he could get a nice bump in touches and production with his fellow running mate Antonio Gibson out with an injury. Peyton Barber is also on the team, and he will get a decent amount of carries, but with Gibson out, I think that just more secures his role as the primary pass catcher on that team, and it also gives him a chance to possibly get, a few more carries here and there potentially. I have him as a low-end RB2 in PPR and more of an RB3 in standard leagues. This matchup isn't necessarily amazing against the 49ers, but he's gotten so many targets that, especially in PPR leagues, as long as he's just getting those short little dink and dunk catches, he should be a pretty safe play. I think he's a pretty safe play for double-digit fantasy points, again, especially in PPR. And like I said, he's been getting a ton of targets this season. I'll just go over the last few weeks here. So in week 9, he had 14 targets, 9 receptions. Week 10, 15 targets, 7 receptions. Weeks 11 and 12, he didn't get a ton of targets, only 4 in week 11 and 2 in week 12. But then in week 13 against Pittsburgh, he had 10 targets, 10 receptions. So again, I think with Gibson out, he should see a more stable allotment of touches in this game. And in PPR leagues, as long as he's getting those receptions, he should be a fine low-end RB2 play. Next up, I'm going to move on to my running back sits of the week for week 14 of the 2020 fantasy football season. And the first running back that we're going to talk about here is Philadelphia Eagles running back Miles Sanders. He's been very, very disappointing lately. The last 3 weeks, he's been the running back 34, 40, and 52 in half PPR. I have him as a very risky low-end RB2, maybe even an RB3 this week. And while he's kind of in that same range as J.D. McKissic, I prefer McKissic this week. I'm actually starting McKissic over Miles Sanders in one of my leagues. It's a half PPR league. It's a little more of a decision in a standard league, but the reason that I'm kind of worried about Miles Sanders this week is compared to McKissic, he has that solid volume in the passing game where he should be fine. He should at least have a decent game. Miles Sanders, he can always break off a long run, which you always have to consider those type of players in your lineup depending on the context of your team. But like I said, he can always break off a long run. But this is a terrible matchup against New Orleans, so I could see this being a very rough game for Sanders unless he breaks off a big run or gets in the end zone somehow. And another thing to note is that the Eagles are trotting out a new quarterback this week in rookie Jalen Hurts. And while it is going to be pretty hard for this offense to get much worse than it was under Carson Wentz, Hurts still is a rookie quarterback, and the matchup is awful. For the Eagles. The Saints have been a tremendous defense, especially lately. And I could see this game script turning pretty bad for Miles Sanders if they get down early with the rookie quarterback. He might not get a lot of carries. It's hard to say how involved he's going to be in the passing game. So yeah, I am very nervous about this matchup, especially if you look at what New Orleans has done this season. They have the fewest running back points allowed to running backs, the third fewest yards allowed, like rushing yards allowed to running backs, the fewest rushing touchdowns allowed to running backs, with only 3 on the season. They've allowed 3 rushing touchdowns on the season, and the second fewest running back receiving yards, not receptions. So yeah, this is a terrible, terrible matchup for Sanders. The only way that he could really pay off, in my opinion, is if he gets a long breakaway run, or if he gets in the end zone, which he is capable of doing. But on paper, if you just look at how the offense has been performing and you pair it up with this terrible matchup against New Orleans, I really don't want Miles Sanders in my lineup this week if I can help it. I feel like I should at least acknowledge that this is my dog, Cooper. That's why there's a dog behind me. He's just chilling. He's my pup. But anyways, let's move on to the final running back sit of week 14. And that is going to be Atlanta Falcons running back Todd Gurley, who is going up against the Chargers. I have him as a touchdown-dependent RB3. He has really dropped off lately. Now, granted, he did play New Orleans in his most recent 2 games. So in week 11, he played New Orleans, and week 12, he was injured. He missed the game, and then week 13, he came back against New Orleans. So that kind of bodes well for what I said about Miles Sanders and his matchup being very tough. So just kind of go over what Todd Gurley did in those games against the Saints. In week 11, he had 8 carries for 26 yards, 1 reception for 3 yards. And then in week 13, he had 8 rushes for 16 yards, 1 reception for 4 yards, 0 touchdowns in either of those games. And like I said, those were some very tough matchups in those 2 games against New Orleans. So that could partially explain his poor performances. But one important thing to note is that he's also dealing with a knee issue. He's been on the injury report a little bit. He did miss week 12, and he has seen his snap percentage fall quite a bit lately. In fact, in week 11, he had a 38% snap percentage and a 33% snap percentage in week 13. So he is a very risky play this week. I think if he doesn't get in the end zone, you are going to be disappointed. If you have him in your lineup. Again, it really depends on your team. You might not have better options, but like I said, I have him as a touchdown-dependent RB3. All right, guys, that is going to do it for the video. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Good luck setting your lineups in week 14. I will be dropping a video soon where I go over just me personally setting my lineups across my 3 fantasy football leagues in preparation for week 14 of the 2020 fantasy football season. So make sure to subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for that video, as well as other sorts of fantasy football content. And I will see you guys later. Peace out.